Let me show you something that's happening in here under the grass. As I mentioned in previous videos, once the grass gets to a certain height, it'll fall over. It won't grow too tall. It'll basically fall over, create mats of organic matter on the soil, which soil microbes and fungus and stuff will come and digest, and then it'll make mushrooms. I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead. When you understand grass cycles, you'll realize that the nicely manicured lawn is actually doing a disservice to the soil. It's requiring a lot of inputs, unnatural inputs, because it's not allowing the full cycle of growth to death and the grass compiling. So what we've got here is I'm cutting down this grass because it is too tall for an urban space. And now that it's not storming or raining like it was yesterday or the day before, I get a chance to get in here and cut it. Now it'll come back and grow, and it'll come back and cover this newer, thinner grass. And what I've got here is a combination of grasses, but over the years, as it's been cut, there's a certain amount of thatch or residual residue on the yard itself. Again, insulating and protecting the soil. But as mushroom spores are caught in the long grass and then washed down by the rainstorms and the cycles of the rain, they then inoculate the soil and start their fungal and mycorrhiza activities, where they are now consuming the carbon that was sequestered from the atmosphere. And you'll see the ladybugs and the dragonflies and other things flying around here. But as animals manure, as grass dies and mats on the ground, as new grass grows through it, there is biological soil activity at the bottom that is not only serving the soil, conserving and capturing carbon, but it is also being digested by a variety of creatures that can then use their mycorrhizal network. That's the mushrooms. The mushrooms are actually the organs that you'll see after the mycorrhiza has been stressed. It'll actually distribute those nutrients throughout your growing space, giving you better, more nutritious soil. Now, if you want to have nicely cut grass like over there in the middle in front of the house, because this wouldn't make any sense in front of the house, there used to be 20-foot tall trees here, so it's not a 40-foot tall trees. The grass is not a big difference. But the thing that I'm showing you here is that you can use the same thing in your grass. I have a program called Year-Around Green, and it's about how you can cultivate a polyculture lawn that is a full cycle of nutrients grown in the soil. See, I didn't put this compost here. This is years of, well, not only a couple years actually, of grass falling, dying. A couple times when I was unable to cut it myself, I had somebody come out here with a string trimmer and cut it, and they just let that thatch lay on the surface. Look at the different insects in here. Now, they're not all desirable insects, but they are food for the birds and the other predators that come through here. Now, I did see a baby rabbit a little bit earlier, and then one thing I've noticed is that the voles that are typically out in my lawn, the voles are actually in here in the grass instead of in my lawn. So they're in the better cover of the taller grass. Now, did you see that ant just crawl across those mushrooms? Now, I'm not going to spore print these or anything. I'm going to get back to work here in a second. I just want to show you another illustration of the value of natural native grasses. Now, I will admit that these grasses are not 100% native, because a lot of native grasses clump and are very, very tall. Native grasses in the prairies used to go 20 feet tall. I had an erosion on a hill over here, and I planted sorghum. It grew 15 feet tall before it came to maturity, and it did so in such a short period of time. Now, when you're cycling nutrients in the soil rather than bringing in caustic and toxic herbicides and chemical fertilizers, your grass will grow even faster, and that may be a challenge for you. It certainly is a challenge for me during the rainy season. The grass grows so quickly that I can just get out here and slash it and rake it up and get it off the ground before it rains again. But it does grow a foot or 2 foot each week. And that, again, is not desirable in an urban space. But if you had animals, in this case I have deer, fox, rabbits, a whole plethora of natural Virginia native animals that go from a forest system out there to a Virginia grassland system here on this property. Is everybody happy about it? Yes and no. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't see the spiders, the ants, the small insects, the soil biology, the benefits of this ecosystem. It's a managed ecosystem. And unfortunately, they're afraid of it. They're concerned about it. They're frustrated with it. Now, how many people? It's actually not very many. You can have a few people speak really loud and be very dramatic when, this isn't the only grassland system in my neighborhood. In fact, there are other lots and properties with houses on it, occupied houses, that never have the problems that I have because they're just a little bit farther off the road. So how did this happen? How did this get to this situation where we chose a grassland habitat to restore this area? Well, first off, I had tall trees that were falling on the house. So imagine a 40-foot tree where I'm sitting. It can reach the house down there. It can reach the street. It can reach the power lines. So we took down those trees as well as the trees in the backyard. And then the backyard was heavily eroded. So we had some areas with mushrooms, but the majority of the area was mica, and there was very little cover on the ground. And every time we had a big rain, it washed that water down to Lake Lanier. I've shown you videos before of Lake Lanier, muddy water. None of that is coming from my property anymore. I've resolved that by working with Virginia Tech Extension Office and some individuals there that led me to a book on silvopasture that they published out of Virginia Tech, and also the Ohio State University. Both of those universities are in the temperate climate. I'm in zone 7, and so they offered insights on parodying mixes, different types of grasses to choose, different kinds of things not to choose, treatment methods, ways to create biological elements to put in the soil to help stimulate this biology. In fact, I have a permaculture design certification, and I'm telling you these things so you can learn this stuff. And you can have mushrooms growing spontaneously. You can have soil building. You can have carbon sequestration. You can have the benefit of noise dampening from the street here. You can have the benefit of erosion control and hillside stabilization. You can have all these benefits when you understand the key elements about your native plants and habitat. So I've invested more than 10,000 hours in understanding how to do this by working with experts in the field of mycology, soil biology, plant speciation. There's just a whole big list. And I hope to share these things with you through my podcast, Prosperity Homestead. It's available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere that popular podcasts are mentioned. The reason, again, I'm telling you this is because this is something you can do. Now, you have to be aware, though, that not everybody's going to understand what you're doing. And it can be difficult to manage. So there are times, like I'd rather not be cutting it when it's all hard like this or immediately after a storm. But again, it needs to be cut because it grows so fast. The fast growth is better if you have an animal system, such as grazing animals, cattle, or other livestock, because they'll eat the grass when it's down young like this, when it's short like this. Or if you're into white-tailed deer hunting or white-tail habitat. It's also good if you have the cooperation of your city, which is kind of hit or miss in a lot of cases, but with the cooperation of your city, you can actually establish these areas. In this particular city, there are 2 or 3 other areas that are documented, that I've documented, that are managed the same way, and they don't tend to have any problems, but the city is not conducive. Even though it's a bee city and a bird city and all that other stuff, they're only now getting around to understanding that these systems are so beneficial. So again, that's why I'm documenting what I have here and what I've been able to establish in 2 years. And that's why I show you that there's clover under here fixing nitrogen. There's mushrooms that are eating the plant matter that falls on the soil. I'm showing you how the grass that when it's cut falls down and mulches the soil. I'm going through all the details and really just showing you this experiment that is sustainable, ecologically sound, and delivers benefits to the community. If you have questions about what I've shared here, my name is Justin Hitt from Prosperity Homestead. I've got a website and other resources available that'll help you with this kind of project, and that'll also help you understand how these systems work so that they can work for your best use. We're reducing the amount of chemical inputs necessary to maintain green spaces. This is something that you'll notice in the background of the PGA tours. This is something you'll notice in the background of high-end estates and resorts. It is something you can do in your own property. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next podcast.